respected, most people will spend their entire lives wondering why things never changed, never realizing the answer was always in what they refused to walk away from. Let me tell you something that nobody is going to tell you at your kitchen table. Nobody is going to whisper this in your ear at your job. Nobody in your neighborhood, nobody in your circle is going to sit you down and say what I'm about to say to you right now. And I need you to hear me, not just with your ears, but with everything inside of you that has ever felt like you were made for something more. 97% of the people on this earth are going to wake up tomorrow and do the exact same thing they did today. They're going to hit that snooze button. They're going to scroll through their phone before they even say good morning to God. They're going to drag themselves into a job they don't love, sit next to people who have already given up, eat lunch, and complain about the same things they were. Complaining about last Monday, last month, last year, and then go home, turn on the television, and call that living. That's not living. That's surviving. And there is a profound, devastating difference between the two. Now I want you to think about something. I want you to think about where you are right now in your life, not where you want to be, where you are. Are you happy? And I don't mean the kind of happy you perform for other people on social media. I mean the deep, quiet kind of happy, the kind that sits in your chest when you lay your head on your pillow at night and the whole world goes silent. Are you at peace? Because if you're not, if there is something burning in you, something that keeps showing up no matter how many times you try to push it down, then what I'm about to share with you is not just a message. It is a lifeline. I've been thinking a lot about a man I know, a man who grew up with nothing. And I don't mean nothing the way people casually throw that word around. I mean, he grew up in a house where the heat got cut off in January. He grew up wearing shoes that let the rain in. He grew up watching his mother work 3 jobs and still come home tired with not enough. And from the outside looking in, everybody had already written this man's story for him. The neighborhood had already decided who he was going to be. The statistics had already predicted his outcome. The 97% had already marked his seat in the crowd. But something happened to this man one cold Tuesday morning when he was about 19 years old. He was standing on a street corner, hands in his pockets, watching the same people walk the same route to the same place they'd been going to for 20 years. And something in him, something deep and stubborn and God-given, rose up and said, "Not me. This is not going to be me." He didn't have a plan. He didn't have a mentor. He didn't have money or connections or a prestigious degree. All he had was that feeling, that restless, undeniable, burning feeling that he was built for something the crowd couldn't see yet. And he made a decision on that corner that would change the entire trajectory of his life. He decided to walk away, not from his family, not from his community, not from love or loyalty, but from the thinking, from the limited, borrowed, secondhand thinking that had been handed to him like an inheritance he never asked for, from the idea that his zip code was his destiny, from the lie that was you start is where you finish, from the illusion that playing it safe is the same as being smart. Now, I want to be clear about something because this is important and I don't want you to miss it. Walking away from what the 97% do is not about being arrogant. It is not about looking down on people who haven't yet awakened to their own potential. It is not about thinking you are better than anybody. Because the truth is, and this is the truth that will set you free if you let, but the 97% aren't bad people. They're not lazy people. They're not stupid people. They are people who were never told that there was another option. They are people who were handed a map to a destination they never chose. And they followed it because nobody ever showed them that they could draw their own. You see, the majority of human beings on this planet are operating on a program installed by their environment, their upbringing, their teachers, their television sets, the opinions of people who themselves never broke free. And that program runs quietly in the background of every decision they make. It tells them what's possible. It tells them what's realistic. It tells them what people like them do and don't do. And they follow it not because they want to stay small, but because they have never been given permission to be anything other than what that program says they are. But the 3%, the rare, unusual, extraordinary 3%, those people, there's something different. At some point in their lives, whether it was a moment of inspiration or a moment of complete rock-bottom desperation, they reached in and they pulled out that program. They held it up to the light. They examined it. And they said, "This is not mine. This was never mine. And I absolutely refuse to keep running it." That's the moment everything changes. Not when you get the money, not when you get the opportunity, not when someone finally believes in you. The moment everything changes is the moment you decide to believe in yourself before anyone else does. I remember hearing a story, and this one cuts deep every time I think about it, about a group of people who were given a simple test. They were each placed in a room with a jar full of fleas. Now, fleas are remarkable creatures. Do you know that a flea can jump 100 times its own height? 100 times. If a human being could do that proportionally, we would be leaping over skyscrapers. The flea is built for extraordinary movement. But here's what the researchers did. They put a lid on the jar. And naturally, the fleas jumped and hit the lid, jumped and hit the lid, jumped and hit the lid, over and over and over again. And after a while, after enough pain, enough rejection, enough collision with that invisible ceiling, the fleas stopped jumping as high. They adjusted their jump to just below the lid. They programmed themselves unconsciously to live within the boundaries of a container they could no longer even see. And then here's the part that should haunt you. They removed the lid, and the fleas never jumped higher. Even with the lid gone, even with nothing in their way, even with open air above them and unlimited space to reach their full God-given potential, they kept jumping to the height they had learned, the height of their pain, the height of their previous limitations. That is the 97%, not because they chose it, but because they were never told. The lid was removed. Somebody needs to tell you today that the lid has been removed. Whatever happened to you, whatever rejection, failure, disappointment, or heartbreak caused you to shrink your jump, I need you to hear this. The thing that stopped you before is not still there. The ceiling you keep hitting may exist only in your mind. And the most dangerous prison in the world is not made of steel bars. It's made of thoughts, specifically other people's thoughts that you adopted as your own truth. I want to talk to you about courage for a moment, because what I'm describing requires it. And when I say courage, I don't mean the Hollywood version of courage, the dramatic, chest-beating, never-afraid kind. I mean the real kind. The terrifying, stomach-dropping, nobody understands what I'm doing kind. The kind where you make a decision to step out in faith, and the only evidence you have that it's going to work is a feeling that you can't fully explain and can't fully defend people in your life. That kind of courage is rare. And it's rare because it is painful in ways that success never advertises. When you decide to walk away from what the 97% do, the first thing you are going to lose is their approval. And for many people, for most people, that is too high a price. We are social creatures. We were built for belonging. And there is something in the human soul that would rather be accepted in the wrong crowd than rejected on the right path. But here is a question I need you to sit with. Here is the question that changed the life of that young man standing on the corner. Here is the question that I believe, if you wrestle with it honestly, will change the direction of your entire life. And the question is this: what is the cost of staying? Not the cost of leaving, not the cost of taking the risk, not the cost of being different or being misunderstood or temporarily being alone on a road that the crowd hasn't found yet. What is the cost, the real accumulated, compounding, soul-crushing cost of staying exactly where you are? What does it cost you every morning when you wake up and do something you don't believe in? What does it cost your children when they grow up watching you settle? What does it cost your spirit, your actual living, breathing spirit, to spend decade after decade suppressing the thing you were put here to do in order to keep peace with people who are themselves suppressing the thing they were put here to do? The cost of staying is your life, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. One compromise at a time. One I'll do it later at a time. One this isn't the right moment at a time. Until one day you look up and realize that all those moments are gone. And the life you were going to live when the time was right has quietly, without announcement or ceremony, expired. The 97% will never tell you this. They can't. They haven't seen it yet. They're still waiting for the right time. They're still perfecting the plan. They're still making sure everybody is comfortable before they take one step toward their own dream. But the 3%, those people, they understood something fundamental. They understood that a good plan executed today is worth 1,000 perfect plans that never leave the notebook. They understood that the dream does not wait for your fear to go away. And most importantly, they understood that walking away from the crowd is not the end of something. It is the beginning of everything. Let me tell you something about the walk, because everybody wants to talk about the destination. Everybody wants to talk about the breakthrough moment, the success story, the day everything finally came together. But nobody wants to sit down with you and tell you the truth about what happens between the decision and the destination. Nobody wants to talk about the middle. And the middle is where most people quit. The middle is where the 97% go back to what they know. The middle is the most dangerous place on the journey because it's far enough from where you started that you can't easily go back, and it's not yet close enough to where you're going that you can see the finish line. And in that middle place, in that desert season, everything in you is going to scream that you made a mistake. I need you to be ready for that moment because it is coming. And if you are not ready for it, it will swallow you whole. There is a price to walking away from the crowd. And I want to be honest with you about what that price looks like, not to scare you off the path, but because I believe that the person who is prepared for the cost is the person who survives long enough to collect the reward. The first thing they don't warn you about is the loneliness, not the temporary loneliness of a Friday night when your phone isn't ringing. I mean the deep existential loneliness of being on a path that the people closest to you cannot see, cannot understand, and sometimes cannot support. I mean the loneliness of sitting at a family dinner table where everyone is laughing and talking and living their lives, and inside you, there's a whole world being built that nobody at that table can access. I mean the loneliness of having a vision so vivid and so real to you that it feels more real than the room you're sitting in. And yet, when you try to describe it to the people you love most, they look at you with a kind of gentle, well-meaning concern that is more devastating than outright rejection. Because rejection you can push against, doubt you can fight. But gentle concern, I just don't want to see you get hurt kind that one gets inside you. That one sits at the kitchen table with you at 2 a.m. when you're questioning everything. That one whispers in the voice of the people you trust most. And that is the loneliness that breaks people, not the absence of support from strangers, the presence of doubt in the people who love you. I think about a woman I heard about once, a woman who had worked in the same office for 11 years. 11 years of showing up on time, doing what was asked, collecting her check, going home, and doing it all again. And by every external measure, her life looked fine. She had a job. She had stability. She had the thing that most people spend their whole lives chasing: security. And she was miserable, not dramatically miserable, not falling apart in public, but privately, quietly, daily miserable in the way that only you know about when you're the one living it. She had a gift. She had always had it. Since she was a little girl, she could cook in a way that made people close their eyes, made people stop mid-sentence and just be still for a moment, made people feel through food something they couldn't quite put into words but desperately needed to feel. She had a gift that was about more than taste. It was about connection, about love, expressed through a language that everyone, regardless of background or education or status, could receive. But she had been told in 100 different ways by 100 different voices over 100 different years that gifts don't pay bills, that passion is not a business plan, that the sensible thing, the responsible thing, the grown-up thing was to hold on to the steady job and keep the gift as a hobby, as a weekend thing, as something nice she did that wasn't to be taken seriously, as a livelihood. And so she did. For 11 years, she did exactly that, until the day she got called into an office and was told in a conversation that lasted less than 7 minutes that her position was being eliminated. 11 years, and it ended in less time than it takes to eat a sandwich. And here is what I need you to understand about that moment, because this is the part of the story that matters most. That day, the day she walked out of that building with a box of her belongings, 11 years of her life behind her, that day was not the worst day of her life. It felt like it. It looked like it. Anyone watching from the outside would have called it a tragedy, but that day was the gift. That day was the forceful, uncomfortable, nobody asked for this gift of being pushed off a ledge she never would have jumped from on her own. 6 months later, she had a small catering operation running out of her home. 18 months after that, she had a location. 3 years after that, she had a waiting list. Not because the path was smooth, not because everyone believed in her, not because she woke up every morning full of confidence and certainty and Instagram-worthy motivation, but because she had finally stopped making the comfort of staying more important than the calling of going. And here is what she told someone close to her about those first months. She said, the hardest part wasn't the money. The hardest part was the voices. Not the voices of my critics. The voices of people who loved me, asking me if I was sure, asking me when I was going to get a real job again, asking me if I had thought about what happens if it doesn't work. And I had to learn, I had to teach myself every single day to be more committed to my vision than I was to their comfort. That is the price right there. That is the price that the 97% are not willing to pay. Not because they don't have dreams, but because their love for the people in their lives and their need to be loved back is louder than the voice of the calling. And I understand that. I want you to know I'm not standing here in judgment of that, because love is not a small thing. The approval of the people who matter to us is not a small thing. The desire to be understood, to be accepted, to not be the one at the table who makes everyone nervous with their unconventional choices, that is not weakness. That is humanity. But here is the hard truth. Here is the thing that no amount of wanting it to be different will change. You cannot live someone else's life and call it yours. You cannot spend your existence making other people comfortable in their limitations and then wonder why you never reached yours. At some point, at some terrifying, liberating, holy point, you have to choose your calling over your comfort. You have to choose your future over your fear. You have to choose the life you were built to live over the life that other people imagine for you. And when you make that choice, not everyone is going to celebrate it. Let me say that again, because somebody in this moment needs to hear it directly. When you make that choice, not everyone is going to celebrate it. Some people are going to be confused. Some people are going to be concerned. Some people, and this is the painful one, some people who smiled when you were playing small are going to go quiet when you start to grow, because your growth is a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look at what their own reflection shows them. That is not your responsibility to manage. Your job is not to shrink yourself so that the people around you don't have to feel the discomfort of their own unlived potential. Your job is to grow so completely, so unapologetically, so fully into who you were designed to be, that the people who are ready to see it are inspired, and the people who aren't ready are at least given the gift of witnessing what's possible. Now, let me tell you about another price. Wow. That is subtler but equally devastating: the price of time. The 97%, and this is something I think about deeply, because time is the one currency that nobody can earn back. The 97% trade their time for money. And that sounds like a perfectly reasonable arrangement until you examine it closely, until you sit down and do the math that most people are too afraid to do. They trade their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 5/7 of their living week for 2 days of freedom. They trade the best hours of their days, the hours when their minds are sharpest and their energy is highest, doing work that builds someone else's dream. And then they take what's left, the tired hours, the exhausted hours, the I just need to decompress hours, and they call that their life. I'm not saying don't work. Work is sacred. Work is how we express our gifts in the world. Work is dignity. But there's a profound difference between working in your purpose and working for your survival while your purpose waits patiently in a drawer somewhere, aging like a letter that never got sent. The question is not whether you will spend your time. The question is who you will spend it for. And the 3%, those people woke up one day and decided that while they might not be able to immediately change every circumstance, they could immediately change the direction. They could point themselves, starting today, toward a life where their time was eventually their own, where what they built was theirs, where the sweat of their effort compounded in their own account, not someone else's. And they endured the middle. That uncomfortable, uncertain, nobody applauding, sometimes not even eating right middle, because they understood something that the crowd had forgotten. They understood that delayed gratification is not punishment. Delayed gratification is strategy. Let me talk to you now about what I call the comfort trap, because this one is the most seductive of all the traps. This is the one that catches the brightest people, the most talented people, the people who have every gift they need to live an extraordinary life, but who choose over and over again the known pain of staying over the unknown possibility of going. Comfort is not your friend. I know that sounds wrong. I know everything in our cultural programming tells us that the goal is to get comfortable, get stable, get settled. And there is a version of that that's true. Peace is a beautiful thing. Rest is a sacred thing. But there is a kind of comfort that is slow poison, a kind of comfort that feels like safety but is actually stagnation, a kind of comfort where you are not resting from the work, you are hiding from the call. The 97% have mastered the art of making their cage comfortable. They've decorated it beautifully. They've filled it with entertainment and routine and just enough satisfaction to quiet the voice that keeps asking for more. And from a distance, it looks like a life. It has all the right furniture in all the right places. but there is no growth in it. There is no reaching in it. There is no moment where they lay down at the end of the day and feel the particular exhaustion of someone who has given everything they had towards something that truly matters. And I want to be very clear. I am not describing other people right now. I am describing a version of myself that I had to be willing to confront. I am describing a chapter that I had to be willing to close. Because the walk away is not a one-time decision. It is a daily discipline. Every morning you wake up and the crowd is still there, and every morning you have to choose again. That is what the 3% understand, that the 97% don't. It is not a single dramatic moment of breakthrough. It is 1,000 small, daily, unglamorous choices. It is choosing to work on your vision at 10 o'clock at night when you are tired. It is choosing to invest in you. Growth when spending that money on something comfortable would be so much easier. It is choosing to stay in the room with your discomfort instead of running to something that numbs it. It is choosing over and over and over again to be the person you decided to become, even on the days when that person feels impossibly far from where you currently stand. Because here is what I know to be true. After everything I have seen and everything I have lived, the distance between who you are and who you are capable of becoming is not as vast as it feels in the dark. What makes it feel impossible is not the size of the gap. What makes it feel impossible is the weight of accumulated small surrenders. Every time you hit the snooze button on your dream, and I mean that metaphorically, not just literally, every time you choose the comfortable no over the terrifying yes, that choice adds weight, and weight accumulates. And accumulated weight becomes a story you tell yourself about what's possible for your life. But here is the redemptive truth. Here is the thing that I hold on to and that I want you to hold on to like a rope when the water gets deep. Every decision can be reversed. Every small surrender can be replaced with a small advance. And small advances, the way small surrenders accumulate into weight, small advances accumulate into momentum. And momentum, once it builds, is one of the most powerful forces in the human experience. You don't need to change everything today. You just need to change the direction. Point yourself toward the life you were designed for and then start walking, even slowly, even imperfectly, even on days when the walking feels more like crawling. Because every step in the right direction, no matter how small, is a step that the 97% are not taking. And that difference over time becomes everything. The woman who walked out of that office with a box, she didn't have a perfect plan. She had a direction and a decision, and that was enough to begin. That is enough for you too.